Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and Stacy. This is episode 295. I am joined on it is a lovely Tuesday morning. I don't feel lovely, but it is a lovely Tuesday morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Stacy. That is at StacyFan89 on Twitter. Stacy, how are you doing on this? What do you call a not victory Monday or Tuesday? Is that like a anti-victory, loss, loser? I'm not sure. What do we call that?
I mean, as somebody who lost a game in the finals once said, everybody has to go up and get to work tomorrow. So I think for most people, it's just Monday, normal. So without Victory Monday, Monday is just Monday. So, but I'm doing pretty well. I'm coming to you from the beautiful Smoky Mountains, Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and even the Knicks couldn't ruin me getting my master's degree this weekend and finally being done with that. So, it definitely had some good news, some medicine to take, or some sugar to take the bitter medicine that the heat delivered.
Yeah, congrats on getting your master's. It's good that now we have, an actual piece of paper that confirms that you're a massive nerd. So that's good. Before we get started, I have to make a few announcements. The first being that the Strickland has an Instagram. Check that out. That is at strict.land on Instagram. We're posting all kinds of new content on there. The Strickland also has a YouTube channel where you may be watching this podcast. If you are, please hit like and then subscribe to the channel. That would be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise. I'm not wearing any of it. Stacy's not wearing any of it. We're wearing, just so you know, we're not wearing any merchandise that the Strickland provides. We are wearing clothing. But
I'm not wearing any pants, by the way. So
look at that. Good for you. The Strickland has, there's t-shirts, there's sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, all kinds of stuff. So check that out. That is on our website. And finally, the Strickland has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There is a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland, this podcast that I host every Friday along with Prez. You also get access to the Strickland Mailbag, hosted by Andrew Steele, a.k.a. Doug, a.k.a. the Doug Bag, alongside Dallas Amico every other week. You also get access to the Strickland Discord, where the conversation never stops, win or lose. There are further tiers. There is a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland, my solo pod, where I rant and rave about the Knicks even more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Miranda, one of the best in the business. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, $100 tier. This comes with a variety of additional benefits like listening in our pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. None of this would be possible without you. So without further ado, let's get started. The Knicks lost one of the most frustrating playoff losses. Not that they have a wide litany of playoff losses in recent memory, but this was as frustrating to me as I tweeted this after the game yesterday, but like this entire series since game one has been giving me 2013 Pacers vibes. Every single game feels like, exactly like it was in that. I know that the Knicks in that series had this awesome game too, but then games 3 and 4 in Indiana felt exactly to me like games 3 and 4 felt in Miami. That Saturday game 3, I have no idea what the hell that was from a tactical game plan standpoint, from an effort standpoint, very specifically Julius Randle, who I thought was, I don't know. And then yesterday,
you think it was Friday night in Miami?
No,
that had them.
I wish I could chalk it up to that, but and then game 4 yesterday, like I thought a lot of the Knicks played hard, and I don't agree that it was like, oh look, they're just getting out hustled and whatever. But you can't play ball games with your best player not competing defensively, not hustling back when he makes a mistake, throwing his hands up.
Is he the best player?
Out of frustration, he believes he is. And the Knicks treat him as such. So whether he is or not,
I never thought that the regular season, and I think the playoffs have confirmed that. And it's not even like Brunson has been that great. Although Brunson, we can talk about that. That was the one big takeaway for me, that I thought he played like a flat out star. But yeah, to your point, whether he's the best player or not, that's it's tough to win like that.
Yeah, and it was very, very frustrating for a lot of reasons. I could go back and clip, and people already did clip all these just low effort, zero effort plays from him. And, this isn't to say the loss is entirely on him. I thought Thibs, that lineup he put out in the second quarter was a mess. And in a lot of ways, that was where the gap in the game came up and the Knicks couldn't get over that hump. And it wasn't just Randle. There were other guys that made idiotic plays. I don't know. What did RJ finish with? 2 rebounds? It's unacceptable. He's got to be better than that. And his fourth quarter, he gave up multiple offensive rebounds because he didn't box out. He also had that play with Grimes where they somehow fumbled the ball out of bounds after they got a stop. And that cost them 2 points.
There were multiple. There was another one, I think Hartenstein, and I don't know if it was Hart or Grimes again in the same spot. There was another one where RJ got the ball, where Hartenstein was also in his space. RJ lands out of bounds. That was a big one in the fourth quarter. They had a multiple like that. I mean, yeah, to your point, just it was the most excruciating way to lose in many ways.
Yeah, it was really, really frustrating. And this isn't. I'm not even. It's not to single out anybody. Like there are plays from everybody you can point to, but I can live with the Brunson struggling defensively. I can live with RJ's. I think the RJ rebounding stuff is pretty annoying, but given the offensive performance we've seen from him throughout this playoff run, I think that's highly encouraging. And more importantly, he's 22 years old. I can live with the idea of he fucked up in certain ways, but he can learn from this, and in the long run, he'll be better for it. That might not come to fruition, but it is something that I do believe, like, for young players, it's a silver lining, right, when they struggle in the playoffs for that reason.
And this is something you were saying. This is something you were saying even about RJ in the regular season. Why, obviously, you were very critical of him, but you didn't think the Knicks should just cut bait because he probably would grow from a lot of his regular season struggles, right? So,
and I think this is like Grimes. I thought he played well yesterday, relatively speaking, but you can tell that when he gets the ball right now, he's looking, if he doesn't have a clean catch and shoot, he's not comfortable. And that's part of being a young player being thrust into a high leverage playoff situation for the first time. And these are things and opportunities for him to grow from. It's quickly struggled offensively for most of this playoffs. And I think it's the first time for him where he's not just on the scouting report, but he's a primary focus of opponent scouting reports. And it's not just being a focus. It's you see that same team game after game after game after game after game. That's a different experience. And I think it's a good experience for him to have that he struggled with. And I think he will be better for it in the long run. I'm pretty happy with what I've seen from the young guys in this playoff run, generally speaking. At least the ones that I feel like are going to be core long-term pieces. So just to be clear, that'd be RJ, IQ, Grimes, Mitch. I'm relatively happy with what I've seen of them. And that's even while acknowledging, Mitch didn't play great yesterday. IQ's not had a great playoff run. RJ, yesterday, I thought didn't have his best performance and has struggled kind of with decision-making at times. But overall, yeah, you'd have to be encouraged by what you've seen in Grimes. Yeah, he couldn't make shots for a long time, but I think it's good for him to get these experiences that he's had. And I do believe long-term he's going to always figure out a way to shoot. So I'm happy with all that. And I'm happy with Brunson. I'm happy, again, Hartenstein didn't play well yesterday, but I could never question, did Hartenstein give his 100% effort? Yeah, absolutely he did. Josh Hart, I thought, was terrible yesterday. I think he might have been the Knicks' worst player yesterday. But would I ever watch him play and think, man, he didn't give a great effort? No, I wouldn't. And to me, you can question, RJ's hustle at times, or did Grimes go for this loose ball? Did Brunson make that closeout? Whatever. The biggest culprit yesterday was Julius Randle. I mean, from the start of the game, he was not locked in defensively. He just gifted away points. He gifted away turnovers. He
6 turnovers.
Didn't make extra effort plays. It was just a bad performance from him. And again, if he was 24, 25 or something, second playoff appearance, I'd be like, okay, I get it. But he's 20 years old, and it's not just that he's, it's also his volatility, his swings from game to game, where it's you have that game 2 performance, which might have been the best game of his career. Really might have been. And considering the stakes, considering everything, I thought he was awesome. And to follow it up with these last two games where you're like, are you fucking with us here? Like, are you competing? Are you interested in trying to help your team win basketball games? Like, I can deal with 6 of 22 from the field. I can deal with poor shooting performances. I can't deal with that. And you, and as a team in the playoffs against an opponent like Miami, who isn't going to beat themselves and isn't going to give you margins and isn't going to piss away advantages, you can't have that. And that performance yesterday was an embarrassment. And it's especially embarrassing given the performance he had in Game 3, where that was absolutely atrocious. So you're expecting, okay, water under the bridge. If he comes out Game 4 and we can get the split, we are back. Like, we are back to even footing and we're good to go. He didn't do that. And, like, the box score probably looks good. I don't know. What do you end up with? 28-3 or something like that?
It's good besides the 6 turnovers. And if you watched, those were massive. Like,
yeah, they were killers.
Completely avoidable, unexcusable.
Yeah, they're killers. And I thought a couple of the charges he got were soft, but it's also like, okay, I'll give you 2 of the charges. You still had 4 turnovers, and so many of those turnovers were these swing transition type plays where it's like you think you're gonna score 2, and instead you turn it over, and it could be a live ball turnover. It doesn't really matter, but you're giving away points, and it's all critical moments. They're all these. It's like the decision making. It's just. It's not good enough from him, and he didn't play hard enough to make up for those mistakes, and it cost the Knicks. I think between him and Thibs yesterday, that was just a bad look in a lot of ways. I mean, Thibs, if like we talked about this in the Cleveland series, Cleveland plays 2 bigs all the time. So if you play 2 bigs all the time, you have to be competitive on the glass, and obviously for the most part, like this season, the Knicks have been great on the glass. That fourth quarter yesterday, at some point, if you can't get an offensive rebound, maybe take Mitch off, and you couldn't score. Get Mitch off the floor. Open the floor up. See what is possible. Because Miami is out there, they're playing Bam with 4 wings, basically. 2 guards and 4 wings, and 2 wings.
Yeah, I mean, Love didn't even play in the fourth quarter, did he?
Love didn't play in the fourth quarter. Like, it was ridiculous. And, again, this is where, I did a thread this morning on why, like, I'm trying really hard because it's, in a playoff series, obviously, like, raise all kinds of issues, and they also raise emotions. And I think jumping to conclusions after a playoff series loss or, in the middle of a playoff series is probably not the right thing. But if you ask me, like right now, what do you think about Julius and Tom Thibodeau? I'd be like, I would like to trade Julius Randle, and I would like to move on from Tom Thibodeau. And part of the reason with Thibs is, like, you're never going to explore all of the possibilities with a roster when he is the coach. And that's never more evident in a series like this where they're playing a 6'9" center. And at no point, other than garbage, like total garbage time in Game 3, has he even thought, yeah, let's see what I can get here with Randle at the 5, put Hart at the 4. Like, he hasn't used Hart at the 4. Forget Randle at the 5. Maybe you want to make the argument that defensively that's just not tenable, and given how he played yesterday, that's a fair one to make. Fine. Why can't you use Hart at the 4 and play him with a Hartenstein or a Mitch at the 5? Like, he hasn't tried that either. And that, to me, and the fact that was that's a lineup that was successful for us in the regular season against Miami, the last time we played them. Also, we saw stretches where Hart was effective against Cleveland in the first round doing shit like that. And it's just like this unwillingness, this unwillingness to try those things unless you're absolutely forced to because of injury issues. It's ridiculous. I just think it's not so much, it's just like a ceiling capper. And then you compare that to Spoelstra. I mean, look at the lineup he closed with yesterday and compared to the lineup he closed with the previous game. There's different guys in there, right? And he's empowering these dudes in a way that Thibs absolutely didn't yesterday. Like, do you think if you're Deuce McBride, do you feel any confidence from your coach with how you were used yesterday? You came in basically because he had to sit Brunson for X amount of minutes, and once you performed that menial task, that was it. You came out of the game and you never came back in until we had 2 guys foul out at the very, very end of the fourth quarter, and you got to play out the string in for the last minute. If you're Obi Toppin, how do you have any confidence? How can you possibly have any confidence if you're Obi Toppin? You played 6 minutes in the first half, and you got DNP CD the second half. How do you have confidence? And forget confidence. Like people, I don't think Obi's played well. I think his defense has been an issue, and his shot selection has been a mess. But like these are consequences of how specifically him as a player, I think, has been used and developed by Tom Thibodeau. And that's not to say Thibs is some bad development coach, because we've talked about this plenty. You can't deny the fact that guys like RJ, Quickly, Grimes, Mitch, those four specifically,
Deuce has been really good, I think. Yeah, when he's played.
Yeah, I don't think you can take away from the fact that those guys have developed well under him. But that doesn't mean that in every scenario the way he's handled them is great. Like I sure as hell will never agree with that. And I think like a player like Obi is the one I think he's been hurt by it the most by how Thibs has managed him. And the fact that you're getting 6 minutes out of this guy in a playoff series, given some of the games we've seen him had in his career, is ridiculous. And I just think like you're never going to explore the full potential of a roster with this guy. And we've seen this all playoffs where it's like he went away from so many things, so many combinations, so many lineups, so many rotations that worked really well in the regular season. And it's like it's just been crazy to watch. And some of that is sure. Like if you want to say, well, he had to because Quickly struggling shooting the ball, fine, whatever. But like to entirely go away from rotations and lineups that worked, to me, that just speaks to like if you punt on that stuff immediately in a playoff once the playoffs start because of just how you feel about shit, that's just the difference between him and like Spoelstra. Like I think Gabe Vincent could come out the next game, play like absolute crap, and he would still be starting the next game, and he'd probably get 20, 25 minutes, and Spoelstra would trust him to come through and make good plays and make winning plays. And it's like that level of trust is really important. I think you need to have that if you want to win championships. And like even a guy like Steve Kerr, look at what it took for him to finally just be like, okay, enough Jordan Poole. Like, you're not playing the rest of this game. It literally took Jordan Poole basically taking gigantic shits on the floor for like 9 straight consecutive basketball games. And this isn't just like, oh, he struggled on offense. This is like struggle on offense, turn the ball over constantly, and just be a complete mess and not hustle at all defensively. That is not like, I can't say that about Emmanuel Cook. I can't say that about Quentin Grimes. I can't say that about most of the guys on this team. And the way he's managed this playoff roster in a lot of ways is just a mistake. And like those mistakes with him seem to always crop up. And it's like, look, we lost yesterday, and a lot of that stuff is on the players, is maybe even more so than it is on Thibs. But watching how we played yesterday, watching that starting lineup with Quentin Grimes in it, how much better it is, how much more effective it is, how much more space there is for guys like Brunson and RJ and Randle. It makes the game 3 decision to start Hart and then never deviate from that for the entire course of the game look even more foolish. And the injury thing that people, he's coming back from injury. He said something like that right after game 3. I'm sorry, fucking sell that bullshit somewhere else. Because if you were that worried about it, then why the fuck did he close game 2? Why the fuck did he play like 15 straight minutes at the end of game 2 to close it? That's horseshit. That's enough. That answer means nothing to me, and that's not reasoning. And this idea, like, oh, really? Tom Thibodeau now all of a sudden is like the injury prevention, like fucking focused person here. Randle came back from injury. Did he get eased into the game? No. Jalen Brunson came back from injury. Is he like, getting his minutes cut and getting no? And I get that they're better players and blah. I get that, but don't like that. That logic is horseshit. He started Josh Hart because he loves Josh Hart. Because he thinks Josh Hart makes all the winning plays. And he does. Josh Hart makes a lot of winning plays. But you've got to put him in a context that makes sense. And it's a disservice to him, and it was a disservice to Julius Randle. It was a disservice to Jalen Brunson. It was a disservice to the entire team, the way he coached Game 3 and Game 1 for that matter. But Game 3 specifically, total disservice to the team, total disservice to the franchise, and it's a total lack of respect and understanding for the decisions and the changes that he himself made this regular season that helped turn the season around and got us to where we are.
As a wise coach once said, you're not helping these players every time you take them aside
and treat them like a young player. You're crippling them. I mean, I think with Thibs, so with the Grimes thing specifically, I think that beyond that, I think that there has just a lot of people have mentioned there seems to be an overreaction to Jimmy Butler. It's one thing, I get it. He's been playing really well. But the hard on Jimmy thing is like, sorry, hard on Jimmy. Josh Hart guarding Jimmy as like as like the default. I do think that was specifically because Grimes had a shoulder injury and because Jimmy Butler is going to like body you up all game. I do wonder if there was some worry about that. Because even yesterday, I thought Grimes did a fantastic job on Jimmy Butler. Like, if for me, it was like he should have been guarding him more. Like he's been better on him than Hart, period. And we've seen it in the regular season. I do wonder with a shoulder injury when you're guarding a guy like that, if that's something they wanted to be more cautious about. It seemed like they didn't really want Grimes singling up on Jimmy in the post. But yesterday, it seemed like I think that with Jimmy, as good as he is as an individual scorer, you're still going to be more worried about him finding shooters. You live with him having to hit mid-range pull-ups. You live with those things because when he gets the ball out to the shooters and the ball is ping-ponging around, you open yourself up to threes. And as you saw late, you open yourself up when you're in rotation, the one getting really fatigued, especially when you're playing starters that many minutes. And, and both as a result of that and just being in constant rotation, offensive rebounds. I will say I didn't think yesterday was as much on Thibodeau. I do think he should have played Deuce and Obi more or figured out a way to because you could see that they didn't have the legs late. I mean, a lot of the rebounds, the long rebounds that the Heat were getting were just the Knicks were like Grimes was clearly gassed. RJ, wasn't great on the glass yesterday, but you weren't springing to the ball the way that I have a rant saved up about Kyle Lowry, but now is not the time to get into it. But yeah, fuck Kyle Lowry. Fuck the whole fucking Heat team. They're a dirty ass team. That Vincent play is people were comparing it to the Zaza play. Zaza was actually his momentum was carrying him there. Martin just chilled in Brunson's landing space. That was
a joke. He should be ejected for that.
Yeah, and that might not be part of the rule book that's an ejection, but that was an intentional intent injury. He wasn't even contesting the fucking shot. So fuck Martin. Fuck Lowry. Bam gets away with way too much shit. Lowry got a foul call because he pulled Josh Hart down. I'm going to talk about the officials. The officials did not cost the Knicks the game. The Heat were the better team. Or I'll forget cost the Knicks the game. The Heat were the better team. I'm not going to dispute that. I'm going to say that this is not the only game where you've seen horrible calls. It is hurting the NBA product. They need to fucking do something about this. You're favoring
if after
certain
every
players.
Single game we can make like we can reasonably make like 5-minute threads of like terrible officiating decisions. Yeah, you got a problem probably.
Yeah, and so like certain guys that are favored get the benefit of the doubt for whatever reason. They seem to get really not like Josh Hart. I do want to for later on. I would like to discuss how much you think. In terms of like giving up offensive rebounds or lack of aggression, how much I don't think it's a valid excuse for Randle, but are they getting in the Knicks' heads? I think it certainly seemed to affect Josh Hart. He lost a lot of his aggression, it seemed like, because the refs were calling just ridiculous fouls. Moving aside from that, I understand why Thibs wrote his guys. This was a make or break game. This was the biggest game of the season. He's going to play his starters. That's not unique to Thibs, by the way, right? We saw the Cavs do that when they were in a make or break situation. I would imagine Spoelstra's doing that. Everyone's doing that. It's fine. With Thibodeau, I do think though it's worth noting, right? Everyone was tweeting last night. How can Lonnie Walker go off and the Knicks role players play like scrubs? You see that on a lot of teams, right? You see, as you mentioned, Gabe Vincent, Max Strus. They are coming alive at a time when the Knicks role players just haven't, right? They haven't been empowered, whatever it is. And maybe they're just not good. Maybe the takeaway is that actually Manuel Quickley sucks and Quentin Grimes sucks and Lonnie Walker is a better player than them. Or you look at other common denominators. You look at why maybe the Heat have these guys who don't have do we really think that Gabe Vincent and Max Strus are just that much better than Quickley and Grimes because they're not even that much more experienced, right? They haven't played a ton of playoff games. And maybe that's part of it. I do think that empowering those guys a little bit more, having a little more confidence, to your point, would help. I did think Obi was dog shit, so I understand why I didn't go back to him. But to your point, you could go with Hart at the 4. There were other adjustments to be made. We'll see. I think as the team gets more experience, maybe Thibs will continue to evolve. I do want to talk about, though, the other thing, that in terms of role players not playing well, there is another element to that, because we've seen one denominator that when it gets taken out, Brunson gets criticized for playing a slow it down style, not passing enough. Funny enough, someone mentioned when Randle's off the floor, game one, Brunson wasn't good, but especially like that last Cleveland game of the regular season, they played a completely different style. Brunson himself was playing with a lot of pace, moving the ball around, pushing the ball ahead, looking for opportunities to get downhill. And I was thinking about this morning in terms of an analogy for Randle. We'll get to the defense in a second, but in terms of an analogy for Randle, I remember when I was first learning how to drive, every time I'd have to switch a lane, you're still not aware all the time, right? So I have to switch a lane. Oh, let me check my blind spot. Oh, wait, as I check my blind spot, my foot came off the gas. Now I slowed down. As I move back, oh shit, I'm going slow. Is the guy still there? And maybe, when I was about to shift the lane, I started to turn my steering wheel a little bit to the right. Oh shit, now I have to turn back. And my dad would tell me, like, look, you just have to constantly be aware. Like, yeah, you have to check your blind spot, but you should be aware if there's something. Like, it shouldn't be a shock if there's someone there. It might be a shock if there's someone as close as you might not realize or something like that. It shouldn't be a shock that there's someone there. You should be able to do that while your feet are doing the exact same thing. So the analogy here is when you give the ball to Randle on a swing pass, you should be aware that there is another swing one pass away. Or if you get Randle the ball on a short roll, you shouldn't have to stop, survey, look around. Like you have to completely stop, check your blind spot, figure out, is anyone even there? Where are all the cars? You need to like have an idea, a map. That doesn't mean that you don't make a quick look like, oh, is that still the case? But that is the word for that is processing. And and that's as you drive more, you get those, you get better at that, and then you do develop not like a sixth sense, but like you're constantly aware of who's around you, what's going on. So when you have to shift a lane, everything stays the same. The analogy here in terms of maintaining your speed or whatever, and not having that get affected is your handle, right? If you're looking around, your handle shouldn't change. And you see that Randle is a mess in those situations because his processing isn't there. He has to, when he gets the ball, he has to stop. He has to survey the floor. If he's in motion, it might affect his handle. It might get a loose handle. Some of it might be just looking off guys. There were times when it just looked like an obvious swing, and he was in this. And then you could say, well, Josh Hart hasn't been making shots. He was missing obvious swings to Grimes, and if that has to be part of the Knicks game plan. That if you have Grimes in the corner, because other guys were finding him. Like we have talked about the Knicks not finding Grimes. They did a good job, I thought, of finding him when he was open yesterday. He got some good looks. Some of them fell. Yeah, so to his credit, Thibs, I think, did a good job of getting Grimes involved. There was one play out of a timeout when they really needed a basket. Got Grimes an open corner three on the strong side pick and roll, which I think we've been screaming for. But with Randle, like, and you can see that a lot of the Knicks were like, RJ has been very unselfish this postseason. Brunson has been mixed, but I thought yesterday one great thing that I saw with Brunson is he was making, he was much better against traps. He's getting the ball out of his hands. He was trusting his guys. Like RJ in particular paid those off. I think that him and Brunson started to show some real chemistry for the first time I can really remember, like real chemistry where they're accentuating each other's games. But you'd have like one guy create an advantage, the ball ends up, or Brunson gets trapped, the ball gets to Randle, and Randle just slows everything down, and it's tough for the other players to get into a rhythm. Now you can say, like driving, right? Maybe the processing improves with more reps as he gets in those situations more as a short roll player. And I'm not insulting Randle's intelligence. I think he's a smart, thoughtful guy. So it's as he gets more reps, maybe that'll improve. But during that time, as your point before, you have to add value on defense. You have to be able to and it wasn't just rebounding or lack of it. Like I thought there was, like, you criticized RJ on the glass, a lot of people have. There was one play that stuck out where RJ was going for the rebound and he missed. He couldn't get the rebound. He didn't do a good job of boxing out, but he was fighting with Bam Adebayo for the rebound. That is not a matchup RJ is going to win most of the time. Randle was on the other side of where the rebound came, so not in great position, but he just watched. Fine, okay? You should probably be helping RJ out there. You see how this Heat are sending multiple bodies. It's you're not doing that. But then
after they got the rebound, Jimmy got the ball on a kick out, and he just had an open dunk. And again, Randle couldn't be bothered to rotate. Randle was right there. Watch Jimmy come in for a dunk. I think you remember the play I'm talking about. There's just no excuse for that. And it was just it gets compounded. One, I'll add two things. I think the last team that won the championship with a player at the 4 who was a subpar defender was ironically Kevin Love in the Cavs. And even he was a much better offensive player in terms of how he accentuates a team than Randle is. But two, even like you saw him make plays. Like he's a very good he's always been a very good defensive rebounder. Randle's not adding that. And I think the last part of that is what's really defeating is that he's going to start most nights as maybe one of the most physically gifted players on the floor. He's 6'9", 250, with speed. He is a Mack truck. His lift has been better. Like you want to talk about, he was injured yesterday. He sure didn't look injured on those dunks. Where he's tomahawking on guys in traffic. But you're the biggest, strongest player on the floor, and you're not able to impact. You're not able to get 50-50 balls. You're not able to exert your will on the game on half the floor. And he was even beyond the rebounds. A lot of people talk about, he's actually good at switching. He moves his feet well on the perimeter. Don't play him and drop. They had him switch on to Jimmy a few times. Some people had said, this might be working out, and Jimmy just went by him. He got blown by Kevin Love. Like you can say, isolated plays. That's not really fair, but he was just not moving his feet against Jimmy Butler, and you're the biggest, strongest player on the floor. And I think back to, I grew up watching probably the most physically gifted player I've seen on the Lakers, right? People might argue Wilt or whatever, but Shaq was that dominant. And I thought I've always been in the camp that he was the best player on those teams. It wasn't Kobe Bryant, but there's a reason they went with Bryant over Shaq to build their team around, is because he didn't always impose his will like that. There is a certain want to that mentality that you see from other guys. And when your leader doesn't have that, I think it's contagious. I think when the other Knicks are playing hard, when they're moving the ball, when you see Brunson, making the right plays, and then, or you see Harder or these guys making 3 or 4 rotations, and then you have this guy who just isn't willing to do that, and that's one of your best players. How deflating must that be?
Very deflating. I can't deny that. I thought Mitch got a lot of criticism at the end of the fourth quarter yesterday. Again, I don't even think Mitch played that well yesterday. I don't think he's had a very good series. I didn't like this matchup for him before the series even started. I thought this was one that he would struggle with. But if you go back and watch those offensive rebounds, I really struggle how it becomes a Mitch issue. Like there's one where Randle is on Caleb Martin in the corner. He doesn't box him out. Caleb Martin gets a rebound. There's one where Grimes is on Butler in the corner. He sinks down because he's, trying to defend the roll man, and RJ doesn't cover for him. Butler gets the rebound. There's one where RJ is on Kyle Lowry, and Kyle Lowry gets the offensive rebound because RJ doesn't box him out. There was another one where Caleb Martin got another offensive rebound, and I think that was RJ too. So it's like these guys, and the funniest thing about this, was they had that possession when they got like the 3 offensive rebounds or whatever the hell it was. Thibs' adjustment was to pull Hartenstein and play Mitch. And guess what? It didn't solve anything because that wasn't why they were getting offensive rebounds. It wasn't the centers. It was not the centers' reason that they weren't getting offensive rebounds. It was just not a good enough effort. And if you want to provide maybe some reasoning for it, I think it's worth mentioning like Brunson and Randle and RJ. I think RJ barely sat, but those guys basically played the entire second half. And Randle had that terrible closeout on Caleb Martin towards the end of the fourth quarter, and Martin goes in for a dunk. But it's like those are just bad plays, and they're just really bad efforts. And I don't know. I just watch stuff like that, and it's very, very frustrating. Where to me, nothing is more annoying to me. Nothing is more annoying to me than bad defensive rebounding. Not a single thing on an NBA floor is more annoying to me than that because it's controllable. And for a long time, for most of the season, the Knicks have been a good defensive rebounding team. But yesterday was atrocious. And honestly, they've struggled at various times this series. And part of that, to me, is exploiting the fact that Mitch isn't the best in space. When they play Bam at the 5 with a bunch of small guys around him, the floor is more spread. The Knicks are scrambling around on defense, right? We've seen that. I mean, the other part of this issue is the Knicks, like Miami's using the Knicks scheme to get them in rotation. It's as soon as there's any modicum of a drive, of any type of potential for rim pressure, you've got guys collapsing off shooters, and then Miami is swing, finding like it's too aggressive of help. I didn't love some of these double teams on Butler just seem completely unnecessary to me.
Grimes was fine, I thought, for the most part. But again, maybe the shoulder plays into it. I don't know, but
maybe. But you're okay, fine. Let's say you want to double Jimmy. Okay. Why the fuck are you doubling with Brunson? What is Jalen Brunson going to do on a double? That's just not the. It makes no sense.
And they usually had him on Duncan Robinson, so you're not only doubling with someone who's ineffectual, you're doubling off their best shooter, right?
So, right, and so you force guys into rotations. You're forcing all these extra effort plays, and guys are closing out wildly. How many times did we see a Miami shooter pump fake, get a guy in the air, and then move and get an open 3 off of that? It's just it was not. The Knicks didn't lose, and this is as bad as Randle's defense was yesterday, as bad as some of RJ's defensive rebounding sequences were yesterday, as bad as X, Y, and Z things that we could point to were on that end yesterday. The Knicks didn't lose because of their defense in a lot of ways, but it's an 8-point game. All these margins matter. When your gift, again, this is the difference between Spoelstra and Thibs. And look, Spoelstra's the best coach in the league. So I'm not, again, I don't expect Thibs to match him tactically, or any coach to match him tactically for that matter. But the level of flexibility you get from one versus the other is so night and day, and it manifests in so many different ways. The game plan was so obviously yesterday. Let's send help at Jimmy. Let's send help at Jimmy and force the ball out of his hands. And it's I'm fine with that, but you can also mix it up, and then one of the things he did that was so really funny was there was one stretch, I think it was in the second half, where Hart and Grimes were on the floor together, and he immediately put Josh Hart on Jimmy Butler, and he roasted him. And look, Butler had 26 points yesterday. One, that was the quietest 26 points I can remember from Jimmy Butler in a long time. But I thought Grimes was way better on him yesterday than anybody else. I don't even think it was that close. It just shows you in so many ways, it's not actually about performance, right? It's not Butler had made a few shots, and so let's throw a different look at him and try and take him off it, get him out of his comfort zone, and then we'll go back. It wasn't a change of pace. It was oh no, Josh Hart's in, I got to put him on Jimmy Butler. And that to me just shows there's always, he coaches in a way that is at its core, he's always going to rely on his gut instinct over data, over how the game is going. He doesn't read the game very well. It's probably the best way to put it about Thibs. He reads the game based on how he believes the game will go. I mean, game 3 was the most obvious version of this, right? He didn't make a fucking sub in the first quarter other than Hartenstein for Mitch. There was no other sub that was made. Then he starts the second quarter with this all bench unit plus RJ, which hasn't been good, which has barely played, by the way, this entire season. You throw it in there in this cauldron of a playoff moment. By the time he brought back in Brunson, it was a 19-point game. The Knicks lost that game by 19. I'm not saying that, if he makes these changes, all of us, that's an even, no, but he waited basically 16 minutes to put a lineup on the floor that is good. Because he had to start with Josh Hart, and then he had to give Josh Hart the entire first quarter for some reason. And these are the things that are just so I can't ever prove that if he does things differently, the Knicks win that game. But I 100% know the choices he made in game 3 never gave them a shot. There was no chance they were going to win that game with how he coached it from start to finish. There was no chance. Part of the second half with Josh Hart and RJ Barrett, you watch that entire first half play out, and your takeaway from that is we just got to play harder. We got to execute better. It's ridiculous. I didn't watch that game and think, man, we're not competing. I think the competing hard stuff is bogus. I think some of the stuff that in the series,
besides
But-
Randle, but yeah.
But like the whole yeah, is Miami playing with great intensity? Of course they are. Yes, they are. No doubt about that. But so much of this like hustle and intensity and all this stuff, they're euphemisms, or not even euphemisms, but they're crutches to hide behind when
They're generalities. That's the word
they're
that
generalities,
Mark
and
Cuban used,
yeah,
right?
right. It's like do. I don't think Josh Hart just decided he's not going to play hard. Like I don't think I don't know. I think you put bad lineups on the floor, bad things happen. That's it. It's not that complex. If you put bad combinations on the floor or unproven combinations on the floor, you deserve what you're going to get. And it's one thing.
And by the way, when did they lose I mean, they played the Heat basically even for 3 quarters. They lost the lead in that second quarter.
Yep.
Who was on the floor together? Hart and RJ, right? And like Hartenstein, I think, bore the brunt of that. He had the lowest plus minus, and he did not, like Thibs wasn't comfortable with him. But I mean, you look at the shots that they took. Obi Toppin taking threes, airballing them. Yeah, you'd like Obi Toppin to not airball a 3, but also like those lineups force Obi to be a stretch. There were so many people that are like, Obi Toppin's taking 11 threes. Like, what a soft guy in like game 1. And I was like, yeah, because he is the designated shooter on that lineup. It's not gonna be Hart. It's not gonna be RJ. Like, he's not like, where is he gonna roll to? And so like, yeah, like that's when they lost. So like, as I think to your point that you made earlier, the starting lineup, clearly that change was needed. And the lineup that ended up, I don't want to say lost them the game, but their worst stretch came when Hart and RJ were out there together. And it clearly just hasn't worked. And they don't add enough on defense together to make that worthwhile either. In terms of the coaching adjustment, again, a second Remember the Titans reference to the pod, it definitely felt to me a lot like he's a mile ahead of you, coach. Like, it took them an entire quarter how to figure out how to get Brunson the ball in inbounds plays because they were denying or get him some space from Vincent because they're denying him the ball. And I can't fault Brunson. I thought he was doing a good job. Like, he stayed active. He wasn't just disappearing from the play. Vincent was effective denying him the ball. That's going to happen sometimes. They didn't set a screen on Vincent with Brunson bring up the ball. And that might be on Mitch. Mitch may not have the awareness to do that. Randle might not have. Like, the only player who did that was Hartenstein. He didn't do that till fourth quarter. An entire quarter where you were able to. Now, Brunson, because he's Brunson, it didn't disrupt his rhythm too much. But he had a poor shooting night from 3. He wasn't comfortable pulling up from 3. So it's fair to say maybe it did a little bit, despite the fact that he had, again, I thought a phenomenal game on offense. Not just the stat lines, although when's the last time a Knicks player put up 31-11 with 1 turnover against this kind of defense in this kind of a game in the playoffs? I mean, you're talking about Melo. That is probably the last time we've had someone play like that. So that was fantastic. And I do want to talk about that because that's a reason for me for optimism going forward. But it's like, and I think Kelly Oberner, a frenemy of the pod, I guess, during this series, he was talking about Spoelstra might have a completely different game plan for game 3, so for game 4, and he was right, and you can't prepare for that. And I do think that it reminds me a little bit, obviously drawing from my own experience, of Andy Reid when he coached the even now really, but I thought his in-game adjustments in the Super Bowl were good. But even on the Chiefs, right? Andy Reid is a master game planner. That guy's watching film. I believe Thibs puts in as much work as anyone, and he has the kind of mind where when he's watching the film, he can come up with those adjustments. But when it comes to making in-game adjustments, to your point, he's too slow to react. And I think probably to not put that. I think it might be more than that. It might be philosophically, I want to give a lineup a chance to gel instead of overreacting to 1 or 2 plays, maybe. Although we've seen that he's willing to overreact when Obi misses a closeout, even if Obi's playing well. We've seen that if Quickly this year he's given Quickly a little bit more leeway, but if Quickly jacks up a 3 he didn't like, he was getting benched. Grimes misses a closeout or something, benched. So yesterday they didn't lose because of Thibs. I didn't think that was his worst coach game. I think RJ and Hart had to play together at some point just because they were down bodies. I mean, you could have played Deuce more. or you could have played. I think that there was definitely a question to be had about whether Randle needed some time to sit. But beyond that, they just they didn't have it. He didn't have he didn't make those adjustments. I do think quickly being out hurt. They're short-handed.
No. It's actually a blessing in disguise because quickly struggled, and this will give Deuce an opportunity. So blessing in disguise that.
But I think it should have given first of all, I think Deuce. We talked about this after what is it, game 3 or game 4 of the Cavs series where he just gave Donovan Mitchell probably nightmares. Like that, I think. Sorry, going into next year, that guy maybe not at Quickly's expense. I don't know whose expense they have to come at. Maybe it comes at the expense of Obi Toppin and you play more hard at the 4. Deuce has earned minutes. He's an impact player.
Look, I like Deuce. My point of this is more I don't think the Knicks lost necessarily yesterday because of Thibs, but all his limitations as a coach were on display. You compare our offense to their offense. What off-ball movement occurs in our offense? What name me a play. Okay, you could find 15 plays yesterday where Miami gets a shooter open off the ball with all kinds of movement and screens and whatever. And the Knicks stand around. Every play is dependent on an individual player creating an advantage off the dribble and forcing help, and then either capitalizing on their own or creating a play for somebody else. And there's no movement.
On-ball stuff. They're setting up. How many times do they just give Jimmy the ball and say go? No, they were often running him off a screen or a couple of screens, get him a step, get him the ball with the defense kind of now their eyes are reacting to things.
Why don't we? Did we post Brunson once yesterday in the game?
Yeah, a couple times, but it was usually on Lowry or something. But
it's there's not a consistent. There's never much of a effort made to change where guys are getting the ball and putting them in different spots and attacking defenses different ways. Like at a very basic level, Brunson is a subpar defender, and Miami is definitely making him work, and they're trying to punish him on that end when he's on the floor. Are they doing all of that by mismatch hunting him in ISOs? No. There's other ways to attack poor defenders, but Thibs will. I personally don't remember watching him attack a subpar defender in any way other than trying to attack them, in mismatch hunting or in some kind of pick and roll action.
Well, there were times when Brunson, again, I praised them a lot. There were times when, and I think maybe this is just a credit to Vincent. Vincent was so much in his hair that Brunson's I need some space. He was calling over Jimmy's guy to screen for him. That happened multiple times, and then he would isolate Jimmy, and it's and kind of on a broader thing. In terms of just knowing personnel, I think there are a couple of botch switches you brought up, right, where they just have to know that you can't switch with this guy, in this situation, or you're leaving a shooter open. The Knicks just, in terms of personnel, knowing their pick and roll coverage, knowing their off ball coverage.
Oh, it was a disaster. Yeah,
and maybe it's because Thibs tried to complicate things and tried to, that's the wrong word. Maybe to your point, Thibs wanted to throw the heat off balance a little bit, right? Spoelstra is a master at keeping you off balance because you're never going to see the same coverage twice. It's tough to predict. We knew how the Cavs were going to play for large periods until they adjusted, but then that's not going to change. Maybe Thibs was trying to throw in new wrinkles, and it just didn't. And I'm not going to blame him because that's what we've criticized him for not doing. But it was a shocking, stark contrast when you looked at how prepared and how the attention to detail that Miami had, and how their execution, their strategy, and everything, and the personnel both on their side and knowing the Knicks personnel was just pretty much all in line all series. And then when you contrast it to the Knicks, who I don't think they lost on effort. I think they lost on those kind of things where they were making these mental errors and just weren't prepared. And that does go a little bit to coaching. And that's something that Thibs has been great at and been praised for over his career. But this series, it hasn't looked like that.
I think, and I mean, all that is also about experience. There were possessions yesterday. I remember this specifically. It didn't result in any turnovers, but I thought it was very telling of just kind of how aware you need to be in certain situations. Grimes got a couple of rebounds, and he was looking to pass the ball to somebody, but he wasn't really being strong with the ball. He's kind of holding it out, not really keeping it secure. And Kyle Lowry's back there, and he's swiping at it, knocks it loose. He gets it again. He swipes at it again. And it's like, those are the moments where I'm like, you need to understand what the situation is right now. Hold the fucking ball tight. Be strong with the ball right now. Like, you're not getting an outlet here. Just be strong with the ball or dribble it the fuck up yourself.
In 4 years on offensive rebounds, Mitch hasn't learned that either, by the way. He had one where he lost it. He had another, that dribble late. I mean, that was
ridiculous. I couldn't believe that.
I don't know if he just didn't. I think that it seemed like he thought he had a dunk, and then he realized he didn't, and then just panicked. But yeah, and some, like you said, that's experience. That'll come for guys like Grimes. Grimes had a mix of great on-ball defense and big shots, and he had a mix of also looking like he tried that dunk on Jimmy, which I think that Ian Eagle mentioned it, or Jimmy Jackson mentioned it. By the way, Jimmy Jackson's a Buckeye, and just obnoxiously rooting for the Heat yesterday was just not it. Like, I can deal with Ian Eagle just like being excited over Jimmy. Like, Jim Jackson was just even he was complaining about calls every time the Knicks got a call. He was like, that whole one sequence where I think Brunson like created a little bit of space with his body. He's like, oh, he gave a push off on Vincent, but the refs didn't call that. And then like somebody just ran into Brunson, and he's like, but like, no, Strus actually extended his elbow on Brunson. It's not a ball handler. It's not someone who deserves a call. And Brunson fell because it's a charge. And they called that a block. Brunson wasn't even moving. So you can't even say, well, his feet were moving. It was as textbook a charge. And Jim Jackson's like, oh, they made that. They didn't give that call to Brunson because of that. Fuck Jim Jackson. And fuck Ohio State. Grimes, his mental mistakes looked like this is a second-year player playing in his first postseason, right? The whole miscommunication with RJ, some of the off-ball rotations he missed, on offense, trying to dunk on Jimmy, he's like airball the layup, those things will come. That's fine. Mitch, it's a little bit more worrisome because Mitch has had a lot more game reps, and some of the issues he has are not, this isn't a first time thing, like just being strong with the ball. But it keeps coming back to, you look at this team, and I think that Jalen Brunson to me has proved this entire postseason, especially yesterday, whatever this final iteration of this team looks like, he's going to be there. Or if he's not, it's because they found, I don't want to say Donovan Mitchell, but like a Devin Booker type, or somebody who's so good that he makes Jalen Brunson's offense maybe superfluous. But that player has to be a fucking NBA MVP level player, because, like, I'm sorry, what Brunson did yesterday, the Knicks haven't had a guy who can do that in a long time. Those are the kind of star performances you talk about. And the entire defense was keyed in on him. And he missed some shots he normally hits. I mean, if there's one thing I can criticize about his process is he seems to have lost confidence in his pull-up three. There were times when Miami was going under. And maybe that's also because Spoelstra just keeping him off balance with the coverage, but I would have liked to see him be even more aggressive. But he's going to be there. It's very difficult for me to see a final iteration of this roster. Every time we try to trade for a star, we talk about it, right? Like, should the Knicks try to get Joel Embiid? Well, that Randle fit doesn't look great. Can they get this other guy who's maybe not a great shooter? Not the greatest. I don't see a final, and I'm sorry he turned around this game. He is a very talented player. He is the kind of guy who can change a team's fortunes at this point in the regular season, I would say. I don't see Randle being on a final iteration of this roster on a contender.
I don't see Randle being on the final iteration of any contending roster as a top two option. Like,
either needs to be a much more
fucking. Can we just say?
defender.
I'm just gonna. He's a fucking idiot at the end of and in any critical moment, he's a fucking idiot. Every single fucking one, he's a fucking moron. I'm so sick of watching.
He doesn't make up for it.
That fucking 2-for-1 he tried to pull at the end of the first half is the dumbest fucking play you could possibly fucking make. Like, first of all, he took the shot when there was like just over 24 seconds left. It wasn't going to be a 2-for-1. Then he stands there fucking posing. Okay, they get a leak out because of it.
Loving basketball.
and fortunately, Brunson draws the charge and it's okay. But like, it was an unacceptably idiotic play. And he makes these end of quarter, end of half, end of game plays all the time that are so stupid, and they never amount to shit. Like, even
what about that charge on Love?
Even the ones that go well at the end of game, or at the end of the first half in game 3, right? He has an open three, or he's a catch and shoot three, doesn't take it, dribbles, into a step back. He hits it, but what is it? Is it a 3? No, it's a long 2. That's the second time he's done that in the series. It's the second time he's done that in the series. You cannot win with a guy who cannot get the fuck out of his own way at the end of games. And this isn't some 22-year-old, 23-year-old, 24-year-old who's maturing and, needs to kind of have those moments and figure it out and learn from. He's 28 years old. He's been the man on this team for now close to 4 years. And during those 4 years, how many times do you remember him at the end of a game, at the end of a quarter, at the end of a half, making cerebral, calculated,
it's
calm
funny.
decisions?
It's funny because that game winner he had against the Heat,
that was a terrible play.
He nearly lost the ball twice.
Right.
Credit him, and he's again, the shooting has come along. I don't doubt this guy's work ethic. I don't doubt that he, even like when we criticize his effort on defense, that could also be maybe processing, right? Reaction time, whatever. Like, I don't think this is a guy who doesn't care. I think he cares a lot. So that's not, but like, it's just not adding up to a winning player. I think that he had a charge again, like he ran right over Kevin Love in transition, right? That is the only card Kevin Love has to play on defense. When he's in the paint, he cannot contest. He can't do anything else. His only play is to basically take a charge. And Randle fell for it. Everybody knows this. And it was in stark contrast. There is another player who's 22 years old on the Knicks, a player who you and I have both criticized for not always making good decisions in transition, a player who can be out of control, a player who struggled around the rim. What did RJ Barrett do just a few plays later? Same position. He's in transition. Kevin Love's there. First of all, let's credit RJ. This was great body control. It's an area he's had to work on.
I still wish he'd go stronger in those plays, but yes, it was a good play.
He's improved there a lot, even over the course of regular season, but it's really shown out in the playoffs. But he stopped on a dime and just puts it in over the glass over Kevin Love. So both for, and that's your 22-year-old guy who has had his struggles. So there is no, I'm sorry. I'm not going to say, I think that we've talked about team chemistry. I think the guys like Randle. I think he's well-liked in that locker room. It seems like he has some leadership ability there too, that he's had a positive effect. But if you're on the court and guys doing shit like that in a desperate game and you're all playing your ass off and he's making those kind of errors and he's not a rookie, that's just, but the thing is this, all of that could be a little bit more acceptable if he was able to really impact the game, even when, some guys go through funks on defense, on offense. He's not if he was even Aaron Gordon level. Aaron Gordon's a really good defender, but he has the capability, I think, physically to be that kind of defender. You would live with him maybe having some offensive limitations and maybe not the greatest jump shooter, or, not a great processor or anything. He can't even give you that. And that's what you need. Like I said, how many fours are on championship teams? It's like Brunson's defense you can live with. One, because he's an incredible shot creator. And two, it just doesn't matter as much at the guard position. It started to matter more in recent years. And that's something to look at too. But you can live with those things. He adds value with taking charges. I thought his effort was, especially in the second half, really good. Benji, I think, mentioned this. Brunson actually he got switched on to Bam, denied him the ball for 15 seconds. And it was in the low post. He got switched on to Jimmy a couple times and held up. Do I think his closeouts are good? No. When he doubles Jimmy, is it basically no one's there? Yes. But his effort was good, and he's able to get back some value by doing some of those things. Randle should be a monster on 50-50 balls. He's not. So
should RJ. RJ had 3 50-50 balls that there was one in the first half. He had the ball in his hands and he's just weak with it and they strip it away from him. And there was that one in the fourth quarter. I don't know what he's doing. He tips the ball in the air. Just fucking grab the ball, dude. Those are the plays for me. The offensive stuff with him, it was, I mean this, I needed to see that, because the whole regular season for me was a disaster for him. But seeing how he's played on that end in the playoffs has been really, really encouraging.
I think his perimeter defense and closeouts have been better.
His perimeter defense has been a lot better. But those plays are just you're fucking 6'6", 230. Go get a fucking loose ball, man. Box out Kyle Lowry. Put your fucking body into Caleb Martin.
He doesn't box out. Neither does Randle. No, they don't box out. So that's why, especially in rotation, when you're in rotation, that's the thing. A lot of people talk about, boxing out is overrated. It's having a sense for the ball and all that. I get that. But when you're in rotation, when you're not sure, you're not in the best position, that's when you just say, all right, I just got to find a body, right? I got to make sure that our numbers are good. And they just don't do that. And you said that the Knicks have been a good defensive rebounding team this year. They're early in the season, that wasn't always the case.
Yeah,
Some of
they
that
were
was
terrible. They were terrible to start the year.
and some of that was they played Memphis, I think, the first game. They had a few of those matchups that kind of skewed the numbers, but it's also because besides Mitch and Hartenstein, no one boxes out, and Mitch and Hartenstein often can't box out because they have to contest everything. Like the fact that those two are such good at both rebounding and at contesting shots, like that combination is rare. It's why Nets fans, by the way, have every right to be excited about Claxton. That's what I would look at if I'm looking at defensive center play. Can you rebound and contest shots and be like really effective at both? But the other guys don't box out. Hart boxes out and has a nose for the ball. But the thing is, if you're going to rely on Mitch and Hartenstein to contest, you have to have good rebounders. So when you're thinking about constructing this contender, you're looking about a guy who isn't dominant. He racks up a lot of rebounds, but I don't think Randle's a dominant rebounder or even really that good of one. He can switch on the perimeter, but isn't consistent at that. And you can't really have him, as you mentioned, when we talked about him playing at the 3, you can't really have him chase around shooters. Isn't just like, okay, forget if my technique isn't great, but I'm just a Gerald Wallace type. I'm going to use my physical tools to really impact the game. Doesn't do that. And then on offense, he's a process, like he can score, but he needs the game to slow down. He doesn't do it in a way that really elevates his teammates. You just don't see players like that on championship teams. You see them maybe on good regular season teams. You see him maybe being, I don't want to pick on DeMarcus Cousins because I think he was really more talented and just a better processor than Randle, but that kind of player who can elevate a regular season team to like the playoffs. But when it comes to these series, it's just his limitations shine like a big red sign, and they are in things that you really rely out of that position, and he's unable to deliver.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just pretty frustrated with how we have approached a lot of this series, and I don't think we've put our best foot forward. I think a lot of that is on Thibs. I think a lot of that is on individual players who haven't performed up to the capabilities. I also think those things are linked. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that when you change rotations that work for all year, your entire team is out of whack. And I think the difference between Miami and New York is this. Spoelstra experiments constantly through the year, right? He's always, playing different lineups, different combinations. So guys have experience playing with all these different lineups and these different roles and these different things that just like that, so that when things happen, right? Like Tyler Hero is injured, it's not some huge adjustment for them to make. Whereas for the Knicks, it felt like, okay, they could get away with, one or two injury or one injury maybe on the perimeter, but it's like, Randle gets injured and it throws all this other stuff into whack, and then Grimes gets hurt, and now it's like, okay, now we're going to start Hart and playing with RJ, and it feels like everything just went totally out of whack, and they're just not, and it's not like it's not just one guy. This is the thing. It's like you're talking aside from like Brunson and RJ, who's had a good offensive playoffs? Anybody? Like I know Hart. I guess you could argue Hart. I wouldn't. I think his role is just really weird. But anyway, like they've underperformed collectively. Forgetting individual players. But yeah, you could say Quickly, Grimes, whoever. These guys have all underperformed. But like as a team, they've underperformed massively on the offensive end, and that speaks to issues both tactical and, I mean, specifically just tactically. Like I think like you're talking about the offensive rebounding stuff, right? Miami's keeping us off the offensive glass. It's because they know exactly what we're going to do. And they're so well prepared, and Spoelstra is such a good coach. He has them keyed in on everything that we want to do. And they're taking it away. They're taking away our offensive rebounding. They're taking away some of the ISO stuff, the easy ISOs and all this shit. Like they're sitting on things constantly.
Which, by the way, makes it even more impressive what Brunson did to me. But
yeah, Brunson was awesome last night. And, I just, it's frustrating in a lot of ways. I think it reveals flaws. And, if like with Randle, similarly, if Thibs was a younger coach, I think you would look at this season and be like, wow, this is not just significant growth. And yeah, there's some shortcomings here, with how he approaches his offense schematically, tactically, whatever. But there's really, this is a really good baseline. It only takes a little bit more for him to take that next step into that elite level of coach. But like, he's 65 years old, and as well as I think he's as much credit as I've given him for being flexible this season. I don't know how much that extends to the actual offensive game plan overall. I think he's been flexible in terms of like, he's been more willing to have guards screen for guards or wing screen for guards and those kind of things. But the fundamental core of the offense is very much ISO heavy. It's very dependent on players individually creating advantages.
And he leaned more into it, right? Like, that's the thing. He had a good balance. I think Brunson is that gifted, and Randle is really tough and to handle. But he leaned more into that and I think he had a good enough balance where he could, in the regular season, we ran a lot of ISO and mismatches. But you keep guys involved. You keep guys like RJ Barrett involved. Yesterday, right? RJ didn't touch the ball much in the second quarter at all. Certainly not with Randle on the floor. Like, they kept using Randle as the outlet. I think that was a good adjustment where they started to use RJ more as the outlet for when they were trying to get the ball out of Brunson's hand. But that's another thing. Like, again, it comes down to processing. They're gonna you have a guy who can create advantages. First of all, before the season, that was Prez has talked about it. You talked about it. You need guys who can do that, but you need multiple guys. And Randle is weird because he's not good enough to be a consistent primary advantage creator, but he's also not good enough to play off of advantages created by others. RJ's damn close. This was, like you said, this is a lot of stuff we needed to see, not just because the shots fell, but from a decision-making standpoint, from a vision standpoint. That offensive player, even if the three-point shot doesn't come, frankly, it makes him a little bit tougher to fit in lineups. But just because of how much you showed, not only just getting to the rim, but off ball and movement and understanding what's going on the floor, that helps a lot. And I should add, when we talk about Thibs or Randle, a lot of people are like, you're putting the whole series on them. They're just the scapegoats. I don't think that's at least not what I'm trying to do. I'm looking at this roster.
I don't know.
Honestly, going forward.
Who cares? Like, you want to fucking... Stars are stars for a reason, okay? They are stars for a reason. And if you don't show up and you don't play up to your standard and you don't play up to the standard of a star, then why? No, I'm sorry. I'm not interested. You want to say Quickly had a bad series? Go for it. You want to say Grimes has had a bad series? Go for it. You want to say Obi sucks ass? Go for it. That doesn't excuse Julius Randle's performance. The guy had his first fucking game in the playoffs in his career yesterday where he shot over 50% from the field. What am I supposed to do? Fucking blow him for that? No, I'm sorry. He was an all-star. He's an all-in. He might make a second all-NBA team. Everybody's been praising him the entire year. You've all been giving him the credit. All the people that backed him last year, see, you haters were wrong. He bounced back. I knew it. Brunson would unlock him, blah, 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 blah. Cool. And what happened when the playoffs turned up? What has he done? How many times has he mailed it in this fucking playoffs? Forget the season and the last time we were What does an injury have to do with mailing it in? I can understand if you can't move very well. Okay, I can buy that. Does he look like he's not moving well?
No, he was yamming on dudes yesterday.
When he's talked about it, he said the ankle is not an issue. He's on the floor, right? Is he on the floor?
Yeah.
Okay, he's on the floor. So I don't want to hear about it. If you're on the floor and you're playing, I don't want to hear about your injuries at that point. You don't get that pass. Like, you're on the floor, and if you're that hurt, then don't fucking play. It's as simple as that. If you're gonna play, then you have to be able to give me a solid effort. You got to be able to make basic rotations. You got to be locked the fuck in. If he's struggling to get around screens because of his ankle, fine, I can deal with that. If you're just letting Jimmy Butler drive to your left because you don't want to move even a modicum, that's not about your injury. That's just about you being not locked in and not giving that extra effort and not doing everything that needs to be done to win the basketball game. Like, you want to say,
you know who else had an injury just a couple games ago and missed the game?
Yeah, Jimmy Butler. Yeah, right. And you want to say Thibs is being scapegoated? I'm not really scapegoating him because I just think this is like, yes, if you get a superstar, if you get Giannis, yeah, maybe he can win you a championship. But like, if that's the only way we're ever going to evaluate coaches, then we're never going to agree on it, because like, I'm not evaluating him based on I don't even think the Knicks need to win this series for me to feel good about Tom Thibodeau. I just think there are specific limitations with him as a coach that this series, and honestly a lot of the playoffs, has revealed. Like, I thought the changes he made in the Cleveland series were good, but even at the time I said that they were good specific for that opponent. If they were a matchup specific adjustment, putting it all on Brunson and RJ, cutting minutes for Quickly, cutting his usage, cutting his role, I'm fine with all those things. I'm fine with him leaning very, very heavily into ISO in that matchup, because to me, there was no other way Cleveland was going that series other than the possession battle. If you take that approach and you need like 2 games to adjust to a Miami team, and even when you adjust, a lot of it is, it's not been great, or it's not very different. That's probably the better way to put it. Forget good, bad, whatever. It's not different from what we were doing necessarily, just different personnel at times. Like, that's just a limitation of you as a coach. If you are a coach that will never play small, right? Like, we'll never, like yesterday, I think there was lineups the Lakers had in that game yesterday against Golden State where LeBron was playing the 5. I understand LeBron is LeBron, whatever. My point is,
but he's also been a bad defender this year.
Right.
So
right.
like, yeah.
And it's not about it's not about that, like, it's not that it has to work every time, but when you don't even have it as an option, you don't even consider it, that is a limitation of you as a coach. You might not think it matters, and it might not matter. Okay, maybe there are scenarios where it doesn't matter, but I promise you, this is not one of those scenarios. This is not a team that can't afford not to explore every avenue, every possibility. And this front office has gotten him pieces that should open up those possibilities. If he doesn't want to explore that stuff, that's on him as a coach. And it's okay to criticize that, and it's okay to view that as a limitation. I don't think that's scapegoating him. I just did a whole thread. I would move on from both those guys at the end of the series. If the Knicks decide to keep both those guys, I don't actually think that's unreasonable. I think that I get it. Like, I understand that. I personally would be. I think the Randle thing is a little bit more different because that's a trade, and you have to get a good return and blah blah blah. But like, I think with Thibs, like, I don't think he's done a bad job. I also just don't think he's going to do a better job, and I don't think he's the coach that takes you over the top. I don't think he's a coach that can compete with the best of the best in a second round series, in an Eastern Conference Finals, in a finals. Like, I don't see him having the alacrity, the tactical alacrity to compete.
Wow, look at you with the SAT words.
I know, but like, I don't see him. Like, do you see him in the middle of a playoff series being like, man, Tony Allen can't shoot, I'm just going to play small, put Draymond at the 5, and that's that? I could never see him doing that. I really couldn't. And like, that's not even some next level adjustment, right? Like, we've seen Carlisle in the middle of a final series. He was like, you know what the key to this series is? Let me start JJ Barea. Like, these are the things that you, a lot of time, unless you have the best player in the world, right? Like, if you're Budenholzer and you literally have Giannis, you generally need to be able to make key adjustments quickly in the course of a series, in the course of a game, to tilt the margins in your favor. And that's just something that's like not what Thibs does. And that's okay. Like, I think what he has done in New York is worthy of plenty of credit, plenty of praise, especially the way he bounced back after last season and the start of the season. I think he deserves a lot of credit and praise for getting the Knicks to where they are. But it's not what have you done for me, right? It's like, what can you keep helping me move forward?
And that was kind of the point I was making with, like, a lot of people, I've seen that, like, people are like, well, people just want to, like, need someone to blame. We're all emotionally not happy with the Knicks losing, whatever. Like, it's frustrating. So that there is a tendency in human nature to do that. But for me, what I'm trying to keep this discussion to is, going forward, how do you move forward? And and some people might say, well, look, to give an argument that I'm not sold on necessarily, but you might say, in the playoffs, we saw that Quickly really struggled to generate the kind of attempts at the rim that really opened up a lot of his game. he didn't complement that with making he was making like the right passes, but wasn't making big time passes. And if he's going to demand, 90, $100 million, those kind of limitations, even if he's an all NBA level defender, are glaring if he's strictly mostly a perimeter secondary player. And you could say, is Emmanuel quickly going to be on those are, but I think those should probably be if the whole discussion about is whose fault is this was this. I don't think either you or I think that that's a productive discussion, and I don't think that's the intent of criticizing anyone. What can we expect going forward, like you said? And I think in defense of Thibs, you might say, well, look, this was still his only a second playoff run as a member of the Knicks. It was a unquestioned. They beat. Look, the first year they lost to an Atlanta Hawks team that I think was worse than this Cavs team. I think if they played that same Hawks team, the Knicks would win in 5. These Knicks would win. So he has improved there. And you might say that Spoelstra's had the luxury of having some roster continuity and being able to to work with these guys and get some more veterans, right? It's a more veteran team, more experienced team, a team with a little bit more shooting around. You can say that with more time and more continuity, Thibs might get to that level, right? But I actually could see it more with. I don't want to go too far on Randle. He's done a lot for the Knicks. I'm really struggling to see it with Randle. But who knows? Maybe you say that Randle, as he gets more reps in the playoffs, his processing will improve. As guys mature and their physical condition continues to be invested in, maybe becomes more of a force in the defense. You can say those things, but I think we should be clear that the focus should be on how do we move forward. It's not about finding somebody to blame. It is what can we learn from this series, and what does that say about the next moves? Because the series isn't over; they can still come back. But even if they come back and win somehow, there have been some limitations that have been exposed, and kind of moving in that vein. You mentioned in the Cavs series, you asked, especially when Obi played well or Randle really struggled, is it worth looking again now that his value is a little bit recouped at Randle trades? You mentioned before the playoffs, and I had actually disagreed. I think I'd been more optimistic on Randle in the playoffs because you said I need to see what how he's going to look after that Atlanta series, and I said, well, in that Atlanta series, he was just asked to be the guy.
Well, I'll even go one step further. I said before the playoffs and during the series, and I actually said this yesterday before the game. I wanted to see Randle in a must-win road playoff game. I wanted to see him in a game like that, and boy, did we see him.
Well, I mean, and it wasn't all bad. He had
it was all bad. Like I don't care. Like I'm sorry. Like the scoring and that stuff it's nice, but when you don't control the things you can control, that shit doesn't matter to me. Unless you put up a 50 burger yesterday, none of it mattered to me. Like you can't control if you can't control the basics, if you can't control your effort on defense, if you can't bother. Like this guy was getting beat off he got beat off the dribble. He got beat off the dribble by Kevin fucking Love. I'm sorry. Like, that is so unacceptable to me. It's mind-boggling. That was like the second play of the game or something. I think very early in the game, he got beat off the dribble by Kevin Love. When you can't dial it up for shit like that, unless you're going unless you're putting up like a 50 burger or something, I don't care, man. I'm sorry. Like, I understand what you're saying, and I'm definitely being way too reductive about this, but like, that is the most, I can always deal with players struggling. I will. You can look through my tweets. Let's go back and listen to the 294 podcasts before this if you want. But like, I will almost never criticize players for shooting poorly, because to me, that's just it's not like you can control. That's not a controllable thing. You know what I mean? That's just, did you make or did you miss shots? That's not a controllable thing. I will always criticize players when they don't control the things that are that are able to be consistent game after game after game. Are you making the defensive rotations? Are you making the correct reads when the ball comes to you? Are you playing hard? Are you boxing out? All those things are within your control. And those are the things that piss me off. And that is why yesterday's game from Julius Randle, especially after the game 3 that we saw from Julius Randle, was so infuriating. In a must-win game, in a must-win situation, you're on the road. That's a game you got to have. That brings it back to 2-2. That brings back home court advantage in your favor.
And all of your teammates are playing their ass off. Sorry,
Yeah.
that was the fact. They made mental errors, but I can't question the effort of. I didn't love how Mitch played, but I don't think it was a lack of effort.
I didn't love how RJ played in a lot of ways. And yeah, you could tell me if you think, like, I guess I did just mention boxing out. It pissed me off that RJ didn't box out, especially during that fourth quarter yesterday. It pissed me off some of his rebounding shit. To me, that's like, okay, you're 22 years old. You maybe don't understand how important these moments, all of these moments. Not like it's not just, when you have the ball in your hands. It's not just when you're defending the ball. It's not just when you're involved. It's all of the moments matter. Every single one of those moments matters. That's maybe you not grasping that and understanding that. I don't care to apply that same logic to a guy who's entering the back half of his 20s, who's 20 years old, who has played in this NBA for 9 years now. This is his 9th season in the league. I don't care to give him and extend him that same leeway.
I mean, again, it's about projection, right? I think with RJ, it's a lot of technique, right? I think he's probably hasn't been coached to box out. I think that they don't seem to emphasize it as a team, except for the bigs, because you don't really see guys. The guys who box out weirdly are either Brunson and quickly, or the bigs. Like it just doesn't seem. But RJ has time to learn that technique and all of those things. Again, we're looking at this as who's going to be on the roster, or who are you going to win a championship with? I think RJ showed me enough where I'm very optimistic about that. I think quickly has showed me enough over the course of his career where I'm optimistic about that. I think Deuce McBride, for example, is just a fucking player. He's a basketball player. This is if there was he is weirdly the most Jim Harbaugh basketball player I've ever seen. But it's not just Randle. I don't know that Obi Toppin. I think I've been lower on him. I don't really like what he gives you on defense. I think he can juice your offense and complement guys better than a guy like Randle, but I don't know that I think we might need to start from scratch at that power forward position. I don't know that Mitchell Robinson is. I mean, you cannot, it is frustrating. This is not an effort thing, but it is frustrating that the one pass that Randle was able to make with consistency yesterday was finding Mitch under the hoop. But if that's not a dunk or an and one, it's a turnover. That's basically what it is. I don't know that you can win forget the spacing issues. Robinson has to basically be dominant on the offensive glass and as a rim protector. And for most of the season and the Cavs series, he has been in that. But if he's not quite that, boy, the limitations show out. So there are guys that it's worth having those conversations about. And look, these guys have value. Like Randle has value on the trade market. That is why we're having these discussions. It's also why we're having these discussions of, okay, if and when we get there, is Tom Thibodeau the guy? Is it worth potentially losing out on a bright young star who has given a lot to this team and Johnny Bryant to stick with Thibs? Because at some point Johnny Bryant's going to get an offer. These are conversations you have to have. So people kind of shutting it down as scapegoating or just being frustrated, I don't think is particularly helpful or salient. I do want to. Having said all that, this is not we have to trade Randle at all costs. I think that the front office is going to gauge his value. I would imagine these conversations are going on about every player, at all times. It's just a standard thing. I think that they may give it a little bit more thought than they did. And they probably did give it some thought last season and saw the value. What do you think? I know you've mentioned Jaden McDaniels before as maybe a guy you trade RJ for. I think RJ is probably safe at this point.
I'm actually curious about that because I think I know there's been a lot of look at the on-off stuff. He's still really bad in the playoffs. I think he's gotten sabotaged with some of the lineups that he's been thrust into. And
that on-off thing, I saw that.
Yeah,
it was that. Those are the kind of guys who have agendas against RJ, right? I don't think you've ever had an agenda against RJ. There's a difference, right? So,
yeah, no, I think RJ had a bad regular season, and the fact that he's playing the way he is in the playoffs actually is exactly why I was so frustrated watching him during the regular season, because he's clearly capable of being way better than he showed. And I'm happy he showed it. But I do wonder if I think trading Randle is kind of tricky, right? I think moving on from Thibs, whether that's the right thing or the right, like, was that the right or wrong thing? Could probably debate that, and I'm sure there's varying opinions about it, not just among fans, but like in the front office. I do wonder if, we heard that rumor before around the trade deadline about them, considering RJ for like Levine or something like that. I don't know. I think that might have just been a conversation. I don't fully think that's like something meaningful.
That's the one player who, if you watch this series and if your takeaway is that we need Zach LaVine, buddy.
Shot making. But like, I do wonder, he has had a good playoffs. I think his
LaVine, sorry, not to, but I just think that would be the worst takeaway. Sorry.
Yeah. No, and I don't know how much, like, it's kind of funny because I always go back and forth on this, how much you should take away from a playoffs. And with young players, I tend to think like until they're maybe 24, 25, you want to be a little bit cautious about taking too much from playoff performance. Good.
Sorry, would you apply that to a guy like Jordan Poole? Sorry.
I probably would, but like I think the reasons he sucks right now are the reasons he sucked in the regular season, which are he makes terrible decisions. He's 22 or is he 23? Whatever he is, he's still young. So maybe that's like, you mature, you kind of settle down, and maybe that can clean up, and, maybe that's the step he takes. But like, I don't like, he's been bad in the playoffs. If you wanted to trade him, if you're Golden State, I don't think that should be based on his playoff performance. I think that should be because of the entire season you just saw from him, where he was all over the place. And so like, I kind of feel like if you're like with young guys, maybe wait until they're like 24, 25, something like that, to really judge them on playoff performance. I mean, we saw this with Brunson, right? He was not good in his playoffs first couple of times. And then last year with Dallas, he really took off. And that was when he was 25 or 26, whatever the fuck he was. So like, it can take some time. And I mean, I was looking at Tyrese Maxey's numbers in the playoffs the other day, and like, he's got like a 52 true shooting right now. He's not exactly
as the third option, right?
Yeah, and he's not exactly fucking killing it out there. So it's like, and I don't think, and I don't believe, and I haven't seen anybody suggesting that, oh, like, does this affect his value, his extension, or whatever the fuck it is? Like, no, like, I think you have enough that you've seen from him in the regular season, and you know what his skills are, that you trust. Okay, as time goes on, he will improve under the, in the crucible of the playoffs. But like, to bring it back to RJ, I do wonder if seeing how, because I think there's always been, and not unreasonably so, valid questions about, okay, this guy gets to the rim all the time, but can he do that? Can he bring that to bear in a playoff series? And as you go on in the playoffs, right? And I do think that seeing what he's done against Miami, especially, and against Cleveland too, but like seeing how he's done in these two series, I think it reasonably moves the needle for him as far as how he might be perceived around the league. And so for that reason, I actually wonder if, like, weirdly, he's played himself into a zone where it's like, if they're like, I'm not saying this is out there, right? I do wonder if there's a world where, like, we talked about Jaylen Brown before, and I'm not totally enamored with him, just using him as an example because he's a player who's obviously potentially going to hit the market either next summer when he's a free agent, or maybe this summer he tells them I'm not going to stay here and they look to trade him. But like, is that now a situation where if you're Boston and you're like, hey, look, like, we don't want to just trade Jaylen Brown for like just assets, right? Like, we want to get back a player that we think we can still contend with, compete with. Like, I wonder if RJ has played himself into a zone where it's like, now the perception of him is, okay, well, yeah, maybe he's not as good as Jaylen Brown now, but we think he can get there in time, and we're also going to get some draft capital for him, so this makes it a good trade for us. And again, that's just an example. I wouldn't do that now. Like, what he's shown in the playoffs to me has been so encouraging offensively that, like, I still think there are flaws there in terms of, obviously, the mid-range game isn't totally there.
But it's been better. Like, he's gotten good at that draw the contact, that little fadeaway on the sideline. It's like he's starting to always get the foul call, and also, like, he's been hitting those.
Yeah, and I think, the decision-making on drives has been obviously way better. We talked about his rebounding issues and, defense at times, there's still struggles, but like, even on that
3-point shooting, he's had a couple of really good. Like if he gets league average to 3, just gets functional in the mid range and can make those reads, like that's a really good third option. Maybe even a second option on the team. Like if how good the first option is.
Right. And so like just seeing that, I actually wouldn't really be comfortable trading him for somebody like Jaylen Brown, who I think is really good. And I know he's had a very efficient playoffs, but like to me, he is very much a second banana. And I'm not sure trading RJ for that makes sense.
Especially in Brown isn't like some all-world defender either,
right? Right. So I would I still think you're better off holding on to RJ, but I do wonder if he's played himself into an interesting spot where it's like there's probably a lot of motivation to keep him, but there's also like, hey, like what? I could see teams, if they have a star they want to trade or something, but like they don't want to bottom out. I could see him being a player of interest, right? Like he's still pretty young. He had a good playoff run offensively and all these kind of things. Like it'll be interesting to see.
Does he like cheesesteaks?
No, he likes peanut butter sandwiches with olive oil.
That would be the destination I would consider. If I would not at this point trade him for Jaylen Brown. So getting back to the person, I think we're both at the point where we would be looking to gauge that value. What do you think Randle's value would be at this point? And what do you think the threshold needs to be for Leon Rosen's front office to make that kind of a trade?
Like, what do I think it should be, or what do I think they think it needs to be?
So the first question is, what do you think his actual market value is in terms of trade return? And second, what do you think that would have to be? Yeah, both. Like, what do you think in your case, what would that have to be to move the Knicks forward?
I would need at least a DeJounte Murray level package.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
But
you're also
but Atlanta, or sorry, Spurs didn't even get like an actual functional player out of that.
Yeah, right? The Knicks aren't going to take a step backward, even if they get a good pick package.
Right. So I think you need that pick package plus a 4 who can credibly space the floor and is a plus defender, which is why this is why it's hard to trade Randle, and why it's something where like even if I want to trade him, I don't think I'm at the point where I'm comfortable with the notion of like, this isn't last summer, and I don't think you need to trade him. This is not like, oh my God, get him out of here. No, it's not that. You should be open to the possibility. And I think in the long run, he does need to be traded, but it's not a time-sensitive issue. Maybe the best way to put it. And so I'm sympathetic to the front office not doing it if they don't feel the return makes sense for them. But like, if it comes out that they got offered, just off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of like what would be an offer that I'd be like, well, I think I would have done that one. Like, let's just say you get, let's say Atlanta calls you and they're like, we'll give you Jalen Johnson and some expiring contract and whatever first that we can still trade out, like 2 firsts that we can still trade.
Unprotected.
Yeah, I would probably do that. And maybe, I don't know. I thought Jalen Johnson looked really good this year, the back half of the year when I saw him play. I thought he looked good in the playoffs when he got opportunities. I think he is a more functional athlete, especially on the defensive end, than Obi. And I think he's what they had in mind when they drafted Obi. I wasn't a big fan of his coming out of Duke because I thought some of the effort, like he had some weird character stuff come out, right? About like he didn't. I forgot what
he stopped playing halfway through the season.
Yeah. It was a weird thing with him.
Which I don't know if that's character. I think Coach K came across as a huge dickhead at the end of his career. So, but yeah, like it wasn't the ideal stuff.
Right. So like I don't know. To me, and maybe I could be, maybe I'm, fucking talking out of my ass about Jalen Johnson. Actually, he's not that good. I'm just giving an example of like, hey, look, this might be a player or a scenario that interests me. And look, the guy averaged 6 points, 4 rebounds, 1.2 assists this year in 15 minutes per game. In the playoffs, he only played just under 10 minutes a game, but he shot 36% from 3. Like, I don't know. I've just been intrigued when I see him. I'll put it that way. Like, I could be totally wrong about that. Obviously, it's a big risk when you're betting on young players, but like it basically needs to be a prospect that I think I like, or an established young player that's on a contract that like makes sense. That's the type of deal where I think you can credibly do it. But again, it's a big risk. Like there's no denying that I mean, I guess another one, and I'd be curious to like, I still kind of like, I think there's something there with Patrick Williams. I actually thought he looked pretty good for them at the end of the season. Like it's a big risk. There's no doubt about it. But like Patrick Williams, some salary to match, and a couple picks or something from Chicago. I mean, I would do that probably. Yeah.
I think but these kind of players you're talking about, to me, sound more like, if they're moving on from Obi, which I would imagine he's going to push that envelope a little. He just got 6 points in a game, or 6 minutes in a playoff game. He's probably going to say, "Give me a chance to get paid," if this is how it's going to be. And I do think there's flaws in his game that make me, especially on defense, that do make it tough to construct championship team around him, for different reasons than Randle. But I think like if you're going to move on from Obi, I would look at guys like Jalen Johnson, Patrick Williams, name you brought up in the past. But if you were to get a guy like Jalen McDaniels, those are upsidey guys behind Randle to see if they really they make Randle expendable. That would be kind of the direction. I don't think you trade Randle for them. I think the other direction is, can you package Randle with picks to a team? There are teams that might have a star that wants out, who would say, we want somebody who can soak up that usage at least. If Lauri Markkanen is like, I would, if he's available, and you send Randle into a pick package to Danny Ainge, maybe they'll never deal with Danny Ainge. Is that something you do, right? If there's Embiid is its own story, but a guy like that who, if you have to package Randle with picks, maybe not a ton of unprotected picks, maybe just one unprotected and a couple of the protected, is that something you would look at as well?
Sorry, 2 and unprotecteds?
Let's say Randle and unprotected, and then 2 of the protected picks for Lauri Markkanen. Like those kind of deals where instead of Randle being the best player in the trade, you're packaging him to get like a player of at least equal value, or maybe better, right, or a better fit.
I mean, I think that's something to consider. Markkanen would be very interesting. But like I really believe this. I think Markkanen, so much of his offensive leap is a function of, I mean, look at the offense Utah runs. There's so much movement. They use him in all kinds of different ways. I think that's part of it. So if you're trading for him, you've got to be cognizant of that. Like, this is not just, we take Markkanen and plug him into the Randle role and that's it. Like, no, it requires more than that. I do think he's interesting as a target. I don't know if Utah would have much interest in Randle as coming back to them, because you figure if they're trading Markkanen, they're trying to bottom out, right? So, it'd be weird to trade Markkanen for a guy that's older than him. So I don't know. Maybe there's a 3-team trade. Maybe you can trade.
Yeah, but that would be the picks would be the
right. I mean, yeah, potentially. So like, I mean, I don't know. I'd be open to that. I'd have to sit down and like actually seriously crunch Markkanen tape, because cards on the table. I was not watching a lot of the Utah fucking Jazz this year. But yeah, I mean, that one's interesting to me for sure. And I wish Dallas had like anybody that I cared about, because they would be an interesting team to move Randle to. We're probably never going to trade with Dallas again, so there's that. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's kind of funny because I know that Miami is the team we're playing right now, and I know that they're up 3-1, but I still think like it'd be interesting for them to take on somebody like Randle, because I think he could actually be pretty good with them.
But
they
who?
actually have they might actually be able to get the type of consistency out of Randle that we have been craving in terms of his mental approach, just because they've had a history of doing that with guys, and they seem to, obviously they have Spoelstra, they have Butler, they have a lot of guys there, but that boat has probably sailed given where they are right now. But yeah, I mean, he's not an easy player to trade, and that's kind of the reality of the situation. So, we can sit here and talk about it all day, and I can be pissed off at Randle and all this shit, but he's probably going to be a Knick next year. And at the end of the day, like, that's fine. I really would. we just can't keep catering to him to the level we have. And I mean that, on the floor, like there's so many times we defer to him, and it's like, why is this the play? And he's takes up so much of the primary usage and all this kind of stuff, and it's like, man, it's really frustrating.
I think
I also imagine this is where like Raptors fans probably got to a certain point with DeMar DeRozan, right? So it's just tough.
I made that analogy to a friend where it's like really good regular season player, gifted scorer who's like physically tough to stop one-on-one, period. You need to send extra bodies. But in terms of elevating your playoff fortunes, there's so many gaps in the game. And it's also like, to your point, some people need to be a soloist. Some people just struggle to fit in as part of a team concept. So you have to cater to Randle because otherwise he can't function as an off-ball guy in the same way. This is what we talked about last offseason. I think it helped that he was able to be a more effective soloist. Just this, by the way, I had a long discussion with a pretty intense discussion with Dallas and Miko in the strict court about this, where he was talking about how Randle is still at his best when he's on ball because it's a different skill set required off the short roll, off of those like attacking a rotating defense. And I said, I still think that's where he's at his best because we've seen how he's been the guy. But I think it's actually might be the worst of both worlds where he's not a guy you really want as your primary option in the playoffs. But he's also not really a guy who's great at attacking rotating defenses. A lot of his most effective plays came because the defense wasn't going to help off Brunson. But in the playoffs, they have other ways to send bodies at him and still defend Brunson. And he can't really do things that help Brunson out. Like, I think RJ really helped Brunson out a lot. Like, they've actually made each other better. I think Brunson, in some ways, has made Randle better by just getting him open looks. I don't think Randle makes Brunson better. And the flip side of is Randle good enough long-term to be on this team is I'm curious your thoughts on this. My takeaway from this playoffs and from this regular season is we should be looking to see what is the best possible team we can construct around Jalen Brunson. The one thing this team has missed for so many years, someone was still saying yesterday, the Knicks need a closer. It's that parroted line. I don't think that's the issue anymore. I think they have a guy who can create consistently against playoff defenses. For all the hand-wringing about Jalen Brunson's true shooting, I think he's probably at 56 for the playoffs right now. It's not great, but he also hasn't been in optimal lineups, and he like other guys haven't shown up.
And they played the best. They played the best defense in the NBA, and they played a Heat defense, which I don't even know what they finished at. But like, I think we know that their playoff defense is always way beyond what they do in the regular season.
And they certainly didn't make the playoffs on the strength of their offense, right? Their offense is 20th in the league.
Their offense still hasn't been that good, by the way.
Yeah, and I mean, I will say I don't think the Knicks defense has been that bad either, but it's just been lapses and just how hard they're forced to work for 48 minutes. But I mean, do you think that's a reasonable takeaway that the Knicks should? And because if that's the case, I think what you want around Brunson is guys who can defend and guys who can shoot. And I think the third thing I would add is defend, shoot, and be able to play as connectors and take advantage of advantages when they're created for them and process quickly. And if they can't do all three of those things, they need to do two. If they can shoot and defend but aren't the greatest processors, fine. They're still going to get open looks and they're still going to add value on the other end. If they're not great defenders, but they help really accentuate what Brunson does on offense with their shooting and passing ability in the mold of like guys like Kevin Love, or even a guy like Strus, fine. But they need to do two of those three things at a high level. And so I'm curious, like, do you think that's a good takeaway from the series, that figuring out how to construct the best team you can around Jalen Brunson?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I think I tweeted something like that earlier this season even. He's an easy player to construct around. And I think this is where, like, you can talk to me, if you want to say Randle was the best player on the team this year, and I'm fine with that. I actually have thought that for a lot of the regular season, but I've also consistently stated that, like, if he might be the best player on your team for 42 minutes, but the final 6 minutes, yeah, Brunson's your best player. And ultimately that probably is your best player. That guy in the last 6 minutes, he's probably your best player. But the point is this, like, when you're talking about stars, superstars, whatever, yes, there's always some level of thought that goes into like how to best optimize them, right? But do you think like when Spoelstra goes to bed every night and he's like, he's just sitting there and he's like, man, I don't think he ever has to think about like, really wonder how I need to get the most out of Jimmy Butler. Like, I don't think he has to think about that at all. Yeah, he's probably very nominally. It's like, yeah, I probably need to get shooting around him and, another ball handler would help. But it's not like some hyper specific thing, right? He doesn't have to game plan for a lot. He doesn't have to worry about him on defense. He doesn't have to cover for him on defense. It's not that hard for him. And like Jalen Brunson, yeah, he's a defensive liability. But when, Tom Thibodeau's thinking about it, he's probably just like, yeah, I just need to put some shooting around him. Another ball handler would help and space the floor and, cover for him on defense. It's not like some significant level of thought that goes into it. I feel like with Randle, you probably have to like think about it pretty significantly. Right? Like he's a 4 and, he can shoot, but he's not going to really spread the floor for you. So I got to like make sure that everybody else can shoot. And then, he needs a point guard because can play make, but you don't want him to play make too much. And, defensively, he's a problem. So I got to have a strong defensive 5 next to him. And like all these specific, hyper specific, like, oh, well, we can't play Josh Hart. There's all these hyper specific things with him that are so extreme, or not even extreme, but like they're just fundamental realities of him as a player where, yeah, like to me, it's a lot harder to figure out how to build a championship team or a contending team anyway around Julius Randle, especially given his issues as a decision maker in crunch time of quarters, games, halves, I should say quarters, halves, games. But like with Brunson, I think it's pretty straightforward, right? You want to put strong defenders around him. You want to make sure that guys can hit the 3 in a solid clip. You probably, you want to have another couple ball handlers on the team just in general because you always want to. Is it much more complex than that? And like, I mean, it obviously is. Assembling a basketball team is obviously more complex than that. But the point is, like, I think that's 100% the way that they should operate moving forward. I mean, he's only 26 years old, so
on a really good deal.
Yeah, so you've got him locked in during his prime, entering his prime. I mean, that's the guy to me you build around, and maybe Julius can be part of that. Maybe all these guys can or could be part of it. It's on them to prove it. And I think we have
a lot of guys. Even a guy like Quickly who had struggled to it's by the way, like people are really down on him. I've been more critical of him in this series, in this playoffs, than you have. I've been less willing to use the excuse that his role has changed and everything. I'll say this, game 3, like there was that one clip where he had a step back midi, like 16 seconds left, and a few people were like, "That's not a good shot." Like early shot clock, long 2. He created a ton of space on that step back. That's a shot the Knicks guards are empowered to take, and it's a shot he's been hitting. Like I think he just at some point he just missed shots. Like, and I know you attributed a little bit more to like the role changing, not being comfortable. For me, it's even simpler than that. It's just like sometimes guys go through bad stretches. He is a little bit streakier. By the way, guys who are 22, 23, I think are just going to be more streaky because like you've taken thousands more shots when you're 27 and 28. Like that practice matters. That muscle memory matters. It's very rare to see guys just come out of the gate and be elite shooters. It's part of what makes guys like Bane or Curry or yes, like not that Grimes.
And even Bane, by the way, he struggled this year in the playoffs.
Yeah, so it happened. Like there's going to be more variance with those younger players. That's kind of what I believe. But the point is like we mentioned it, right? You want more ball handlers. You want guys who can defend. You want shooters. Quickly fits that. Grimes is a good defender and shooter, and the off the dribble stuff when he's not trying to yam on Jimmy Butler is quite encouraging.
He got fouled on that, by the way. That was an obvious foul. Jimmy clearly got him on that.
Not getting a call.
Well, we're not going to get a call there anyway, but that's a foul. And if you're not going to get that call, then it is what it is. I have no problem with him trying to.
I mean, he could have laid it up. That's the point. Like
he could have, but I'm fine with it. Go up strong. I'm good with that. He gets that call against 90% of players in the NBA. He just didn't get it because fucking that crew yesterday wanted to fucking. They must have really, whatever. I don't want to get into
it was. And I personally do think it got in. I think it got in Josh Hart's head. I think that he wasn't the same player. He was very frustrated with the officiating. They seem to be targeting him with bullshit.
I think Thibs has to do more of that. Like, I don't want to turn this into a whole ref thing, but like his unwillingness to just be critical of refs, and he's always pussyfooting around it in interviews after game. Take the fucking fine, man. You make $5 million a year. Take the fucking $50,000 fine and talk about it, because
Should we start a Strickland GoFundMe to pay off Thibs' fine?
I'm never gonna do a GoFundMe for Tom Thibodeau. But like, no, to me, like, you've got to politic better than he has. He just has to, because I mean, I don't think the Knicks have lost this series because of officiating. That doesn't mean I think they're getting a good whistle. I think their whistle has gone against them.
And it has to be so disheartening for the players, right? That Kyle Lowry is just allowed to get away with this bullshit.
I'm sure it is, and it's probably frustrating. And like, that's when you need your coach or something. Like, you need him to, like, yesterday, right? There was that call that Hart. I couldn't believe Hart got fouled on a play. Like, Lowry basically elbowed him in the face, and he got fouled out on that play.
There was a play where Brunson was backing up to like they said he was tripping Bam. He's backing up to try to keep on the shoot in the corner in the shooter, and Bam collides with him trying to come up and set a screen. They called a foul on Brunson for moving backwards. Like, it was a joke. It was an absolute joke. I absolutely think that affects within the players. But we could fill a whole pod with talking about the refs. So anyway, I think that to your point, there are guys in the roster. I think most of the guys in the roster fit pretty well around Brunson. I think a guy like Deuce does. Imagine pairing Deuce with Brunson. We haven't seen that much, but
I even think, like, this is a credit to Brunson. Really, like, he pairs well with Julius. Like, I think Julius, like,
well, he pairs well with Julius. Julius doesn't do much to help Brunson.
Right. I completely agree with that.
More out of that spot. That's my take. So yeah, I think, but that's the glaring one. We're paying $30 million. So it's also why, by the way, not $30 million. We're paying 25 to a guy who I don't think accentuates your best player that much, besides just being another person to soak up usage. That's also, by the way, a reason why I was open to trading RJ during the season, because I thought he wasn't accentuating what Brunson does. Now what I see is that, especially like what RJ really gives, is there's no coincidence that RJ's had so much success in the postseason. This is not to take away from it, but it shows how well him and Brunson match each other, because the book on Brunson is you want to put big wings on him, right? You wanted to put a Koro on him. In the beginning of the series, they put Jimmy on him, and they had Vincent on RJ. And on RJ, just cooked those smaller guys. And it makes it work out for both players, because I think a criticism many have had is that, well, RJ should really be a 2. He's not a speed guy. He's at his best when he can bully smaller defenders. But in the playoffs, Brunson actually allows him to do that. And he also makes sure that if teams want to deploy bigger wings and get Brunson out of his game, RJ can attack the other guys that they're trying to hide. I think RJ's improvement as a passer also plays into what Brunson does, and his ability to function as that that outlet on when Brunson gets trapped. So I think that's an example of a guy who makes Brunson, who accentuates Brunson's game. I think Randle's like the one guy on the roster, almost. Maybe Mitch doesn't as much either. Like, Brunson just isn't a great lob passer, so you can argue maybe that too. But Randle's a guy who doesn't accentuate that. There is one other topic I wanted to talk about. I was talking about this, with someone on Twitter. To me, I wonder, how much does it matter? And I don't think there's been any numbers behind this. But someone tweeted, like, you can tell when guys are getting the ball in rhythm. When they're shooters, especially shooters, when they catch the ball in rhythm, and they're touching the ball a lot, and then they get up shots. It's different from you're standing in the corner, you touch the ball twice, and you have to take threes. I haven't seen any data to back that up. There's going to be lots of confounding biases there, right? Better shooters are going to get the ball more, et cetera, et cetera. But I'd be curious how much stock you put in that. And 2, how much stock do you put in? I broke this down on a tweet yesterday, but Deuce McBride's shooting numbers ended up at 29.7% from 3, which was, higher than I'd.
How many threes did he even take? Like 80?
Yeah, but here's the thing. 23 of those were in games where he got less than 9 minutes. When he gets less than 9 minutes, that means 2 things. 1, it's garbage time. Or 2, it's one of those cameo stints where he maybe gets a shot up. And I've had arguments with people where they're like, there's nothing to suggest that more shots actually leads a shooter to shoot better when they get into rhythm. Maybe that's true. But if you believe that rhythm matters, we shot 1 for 23 in those games, right? When he gets 10 to 19 minutes, he shot 33%. Not great, but clearly he's not 1 for 23 bad when he gets the chance to get up a couple of shots. And when he's had 20 to 29 minutes, he actually shot 52% from 3. That was only 6 games. But and there is some reverse causality, because the better you shoot, the more likely you are to get minutes. I don't think it applies to Deuce, because when he gets 25 minutes, it means the Knicks are either in foul trouble or they're depleted, and Thibs has no choice. I think in those games it doesn't even matter. It's not like Deuce is getting more minutes because he's shooting well, but he knows he's getting those minutes, so he's assured he can get into a rhythm. And you look at a lot of these players, those kind of things hold up true. To what extent, A, do you think that ball movement and touching the ball more helps shooters shoot better? And maybe that's why Strus and Vincent maintain their shooting while guys like Grimes and Quickly struggled. And B, to what extent do you think that allowing people to shoot through it and having that confidence that they're not going to get taken out of the game affects it? Because you can just keep asking, how can Lonnie Walker go off and our role players suck, or you can or can't shoot? Right? How was Deuce McBride a 40% three-point shooter in college, but he sucks and he can't shoot in the pros? Or you can ask if some of these factors are why role players on other teams do have more success in these situations.
I think confidence matters, and anybody that denies that, like, forget rhythm, confidence matters, and confidence comes from preparation and understanding what you're going to be asked of and what's asked of you. Anybody that's played basketball knows that confidence matters when you're shooting. Like, it doesn't guarantee your shot's going to go in, but when you're not confident, you know it. Like, you can feel it, you can sense it. Any shooter, ask any shooter, ask anybody who's who plays basketball. Anybody that plays basketball, even at the park, as simple as that, knows that. So yeah, I 100% buy that. That's part of it. And like, yeah, you can be like, well, Lonnie Walker stayed ready, and then his coach believed in him, and then he paid off. Like, sure, but you have to give yourself the chance. Like, would Thibs have gone to Lonnie Walker? No. I know he would have. He
gone to Austin Reeves. Like, Austin Reeves has gotten so much responsibility, and maybe he is more advanced than a guy like Quickly at this stage.
I mean, he's 25, right? So it makes sense.
But but he's like, Ham is stuck with him, right? And a team with LeBron James. He's 25. He plays with LeBron James. Like, if Thibs had that team, LeBron has the ball as much as Brunson does, probably, right? And they've empowered these other guys, and also I think that helps them even when they're off ball, personally. But
yeah.
But I think that the other part of that is, does that speak to maybe the ISO heavy approach? And again, I think that if they went with the level of ISO they had in the regular season, they would have been fine. I think it's leaning more into it that's been the problem. But it makes you wonder, like, as good as the setup has been, ISO, get to the paint, get offensive rebound opportunities. It also helps limit the turnovers, right? That's the positive of this. At some point, is it to be expected that with that style, your shooters are just going to shoot worse because they're not going to be in rhythm? They're not going to be touching the ball a lot. They are mostly going to be standing around. I think that's a question to ask going forward, not just a Thibs question, just all of the players have thrived with that. But, are you reaching the ceiling of that style for reasons like this?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think the way we play is, the other thing, like, the Lakers play fast, or they play at a pace that's one of the fastest in the league. I think they might have been top 5. Like, we don't play fast. We play a very half-court oriented play or style of play. We prioritize not turning the ball over, which we achieve by what? By not moving the ball a lot, and isolating a lot, and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean,
which has but is there a ceiling? Right, that's the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a ceiling with that entire style of play, and maybe you could probably still win with it if you have a higher level of talent. So, but like, basically what you're saying is you can't put any of that on Thibs, and you can't expect more from him unless superstar top 5, top 10 caliber player talent is handed to him. And that's not realistic. It's just not. Like, getting those caliber of players is difficult. It's not easy. So if that's the standard, then you're going to be waiting a long fucking time.
The last thing I'll say is, how much do you think of that is Thibs, and how much of that do you think is, ball movement, playing fast, making those kind of decisions? There is a player on the roster we spent most of this pod talking about. How much of that is if you took him out and you gave, because they started playing faster after they got Josh Hart. If you give Thibs guys like that he's more confident in, forget superstars, does that maybe change his philosophy there?
Sorry, say that again.
Randle is not a guy who can trust a lot in transition, and he's also not a quick processor in the half court. The Knicks have shown a willingness to play fast. They played a lot faster after the Josh Hart trade. But do you think Randle getting heavy minutes, is as far as the Knicks playing slower in that kind of a style, how much of it do you think is a Thibs thing, and how much do you think it is an artifact of having Randle on the roster playing heavy minutes?
I would say most of it is Thibs. I think you have a roster that can play fast. He just doesn't want to do that, and I get why. He wants to cut down on. I mean, he wants to win a possession battle, right? So he wants to limit turnovers. He wants to win rebounds. He wants to avoid giving up transition hoops. I get that. That's his choice, but that is his choice. I think Randle is a limitation in some ways because he's not a great processor in general, and especially now when he has to make quick decisions. But he's not anywhere near of a factor in that as much as Thibs is. So, yeah, I mean, look, if Thibs is here, this is what we're going to be. We're not going to become some, pace and space and everybody's moving around and it's Shangri-La and everybody's sharing the ball. It's never going to happen. We're not going to be, there's not going to be a bunch of off-ball movement and creativity in that sense. That's what it is. And yeah, I mean, we'll see. This game is, I think it's really important to try to not definitively decide on what, big time decisions immediately after, not just this game, but if they lose the series, go on to lose a series after a playoff series loss. I think it's important, take some time, really consider it, look back at the totality of the season, look back at how everything went, and really make critical evaluations. But right now, if you just ask me how I feel about things, yeah, I'm where I was last offseason, just not as vehement about it, because I think it's way more understandable to run it back this year. I think they probably should move off Randle. I think that, they should move on from Thibs. I get why those things are difficult to settle on, and especially with regards to trading Randle, as we've talked about on here, why it is that way, why it is so hard to find a good trade for him. So I'm more sympathetic to it, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. And, we'll see. Hopefully, they can come back in the series. That'd be awesome. But, in some ways, losing in a second round, maybe, it does cast some a needed critical eye on issues, still existing issues with the roster. And some of that is I think you could look at the series and have a reasonable takeaway be, we need a 5 that's more capable of doing things offensively. I think the limitations of Mitch especially, but also Hartenstein have been on display. And then you compare that with what you got from Bam yesterday, right, from Miami. I think it's reasonable to look at that and maybe have that be a takeaway. I think it's reasonable to come away from the series and be we need quickly to get better, or we need to be aggressive about maybe looking to upgrade with another ball handler by the trade deadline next year or next offseason or whatever the fuck it is. I think we need a wing. We need a more a wing capable of scoring at 3 levels consistently. I think these are all reasonable takeaways from this series and this playoff run, but I don't know how much any of that matters, or I don't know that any of those things are more important than what they decide to do with Thibs and Randle. And both of those guys, I thought, needed to show a lot in the playoffs. And to be honest, I've seen a lot more from Thibs than I have from Randle. And if you if you made me pick, if I could get a good trade return for Randle, I would probably rather do that than anything else. Because I just fundamentally believe that the decision making, the temperament, all that type of stuff is very, very hard for me to believe that he can ultimately overcome that to the point that he can become capable of being a top 1 or 2 player on a real contending team. And that's just,
I don't think he can fit as a third either, right? Because it's just he's just not who he is either. Real quick on Thibs. So Thibs has completed his 3rd year. Someone in the strict court mentioned that customarily this would be the time he'd get an extension, but as you mentioned, he's 65 years old. There's no shame in retiring. Do you think they'll give him an extension this offseason? His contract is up after next year, I think, right? Or is it 2 more years?
Quickly or Grimes?
No, Thibodeau. Sorry.
Oh, Thibodeau. Yeah, Thibodeau. I think it's 2 more years.
So so someone's saying it's customary to give an extension at this point.
Yeah, no, I'm not giving him an extension. I'm good.
Do you think Rose will?
I hope not. That's all I can say. Like, I really, really hope not, because even if you want to keep him, you don't want to be put in a situation where you feel obligated to keep him longer than you should because of a contract you gave him. He's making plenty of money. If they want to, at most, I would throw an extra year onto it. But I'm not interested in giving him some, like, a 3 or 4 year extension or something. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, so I wonder if Thibs would retire, coach out his contract, and either retire or go somewhere else, and if Johnny Bryant has been given that kind of you're the coach in waiting thing. But I am curious what happens with that. I think an extension would be jumping the gun. I definitely agree with that. So,
yeah. All right. I think that's a good place to end it. We've been going here for a while. Stacy, let the people know where they can find you and plug anything you'd like to plug.
Stacy Patton 89. I will plug. I think we're going to be stepping up the draft coverage soon. Hopefully with a pick in hand. But even if the Knicks get screwed by Dallas, there's a possibility they would trade back in the late first round, early second. So check out all the content, especially we're going to have a new big board released, and Perez is always putting out a ton of good content. So I'll plug that.
Nice. I'm looking forward to all that. Hopefully we have a draft pick. That'd be cool. But other than that, I don't have much to plug. I will plug all the work at Strickland. The recaps have been great during the playoffs. The rundown that Sam and Tyrese are doing after each game. All the various articles. Colin wrote a really good one about Josh Hart that dropped yesterday before the game. Definitely worth checking out some of the issues that have arisen from Thibs' usage of him. And, we were very critical of him. Credit to Thibs for going back to Grimes in the starting lineup yesterday. Yeah, so we'll see. The Knicks play Wednesday. Hopefully they can get a win and extend this series, bring it back to Miami, and at least give yourself a chance. That'd be nice. And hopefully Quickly's back for that game tomorrow, because they need him, man. Like, Brunson played 44 minutes yesterday. If he doesn't trust Deuce, like, say whatever you want about Quickly, and he struggled, like, I will always believe that guy's trying to turn it around at some point. It's just, you got to give him the chance. And if he's out there, I at least believe that there's always a chance that he can turn it around and get going. And if he gets going, that obviously helps the Knicks, and it helps Brunson. I mean, if Brunson's dealing with as much shit as it seems like he's dealing with, very, very, one, impressive that he's out there, and two, necessary that Quickly gets back, because obviously Thibs does not trust Deuce right now to help out at all.
You definitely don't want to have Brunson aggravate something. Like, you go balls to the wall for the playoffs, but
unless you're Cody Martin, you definitely want him, or Caleb Martin. Sorry.
Whoever. Fuck them both, man. Tell your brother to stop being an asshole.
Yeah. All right. That is our pod for today. I hope everybody has a great week. Go Knicks. And I will probably see you on Wednesday after Game 5.